And our principal correspondent Siddhant Sibal has been closely tracking the G20 Summit as he joins me live from Osaka in Japan. Let's quickly go across to Siddhant. Siddhant, a very good morning to you. The mood in Osaka, of course, seems to be high on adrenaline. We believe that in just some time from now, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be having a bilateral with Shinzo Abe of Japan. What can we expect out of this meet, considering that India and Japan share some very special ties?
Well, in just 1 hour's time, the Indian Prime Minister will be having his first bilateral meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, with which he shares very close ties. We have seen visuals, whether it's from Varanasi, whether it's from Gujarat, or whether it's from the residence of the Japanese Prime Minister, where the Indian Prime Minister was hosted last year, which is a rare honor for a foreign leader. So clearly, this time around also, we do expect a lot of things to be discussed. We know India and Japan are working on infrastructure projects in third countries, especially in the vicinity of India. Sri Lanka, for example, India, Sri Lanka and Japan have signed just days before this summit. They signed this trilateral MOU of memorandum of understanding to develop the Colombo port. And of course, the Japanese are helping India build its bullet train. So clearly, it's a relationship which is kind of a close relationship, but also a relationship which is a win-win for both of them.
All right, Siddhant, interestingly, the U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, who is in India, yesterday he acknowledged the difference of divergent views between Washington and New Delhi. Taking that into consideration, will India be able to explore alternatives when it comes to the oil crisis in the Gulf, or even trade ties which have been deteriorating between India and the United States?
Well, when it comes to friends, there are, of course, little differences also. And as the External Affairs Minister yesterday said in the joint press conference in New Delhi, that a sign of a mature relationship is to able to come to a common ground when it comes to contentious issues, whether it's trade, whether it's S-400 deal. But also the Indian side will be keen when the Indian Prime Minister will be meeting the U.S. President on Friday to tell him about how the situation, the tensions between the Iranians and the Americans in the Gulf could threaten India also because of the large diaspora, energy security. These are the issues which will be discussed. But if you look at the common things between US and India, or India or Japan, all are partners of a grouping called which is the Quad, and which is kind of a building block of the Indo-Pacific concept, which has been gaining currency in recent years, with US and India being the bookends of this concept.
All right, last but not least, let's look at the Indian perspective. The issue of economic offenders is also going to be big on India's agenda. How can the G20 contribute in addressing this issue? And Siddhant, let me also point out that this is all happening at a time. I'm sorry to interject, but this is all happening at a time just when Antigua has given a nod to extraditing Mehul Choksi.
Well, of course, we saw that positive news, the Antiguan Prime Minister saying that he will be extraditing Mehul Choksi once all the legal options are done with. But by and large, that is expected to be the big headline for New Delhi when it comes to the issue of economic offenders. Well, this is not the first time New Delhi is going to raise this. Last year at the G20 Summit in Buenos Aires, the Indian Prime Minister had strongly raised it and in fact called on FATF to come out with a definition of economic offenders. This year, when the the finance ministers of the G20 countries met, which of course the new finance minister of India, Nirmala Sitharaman, was in Japan. She strongly raised the issue of economic offenders being provided safe haven. So clearly that remains the focus, and the Indian Prime Minister has been raising the issue of black money. In fact, his first G20 which he went was in Australia in 2014, and he strongly raised the issue of black money and corruption.
All right, black money and corruption also to be the target. Last but not the least, before I let you go, Siddhant, from trade to tariff, Donald Trump's bilateral with Chinese President Xi Jinping is also going to be one to watch out for. All this, at a time when he just targeted China and Japan just before his departure.
Well, that's something that the world will be watching, the global capitals will be watching, because the Chinese and the American trade war threaten the global the economic system, and of course countries going towards a more protectionist regime, which is dangerous for countries, developing countries such as India, because they would like to have an open, globalized system that has in fact benefited India, especially after 1990s. So this is something that everyone will be waiting for. But in fact, if I can tell you, if I can jog the memories of our viewers, that both of them had a bilateral on the sidelines of the Buenos Aires summit, the G20 summit, which happened in December. And initially there was a euphoria about the bilateral. Both of the sides also came up with certain meetings, certain agenda, certain plans. But what happened? The American president again said that he will be putting more tariffs if the Chinese do not follow what he would like to see. But that's part of his deal making. But of course, his part of the deal making is threatening the global economic order.